Welcome to Exploring and Preparing for Adult Work, a presentation brought to you by Ask Resource Center about students with disabilities transitioning from high school into adult life. During this session, we'll discuss the following: how and why work is an important part of adult life, high expectations and the importance of maintaining those for all individuals when discussing employment, laws supporting employment, the preparation for employment for those students in high school, and lastly, how the secondary transition planning process supports and empowers those employment goals and the students working towards them. So the first step in this process of preparing our young people with disabilities for the world of work is simply talking about it. Start talking. Talk about why work is so important. Talk about the benefits, everything from the financial, of course, to the social aspects and the self-esteem. Families can begin preparing youth for work by talking about this, having conversations, talking about the work that they are doing or have done, allowing the youth to ask questions about what you like or dislike about your work, describing what education, training, or experience you needed before and to maintain your job, reinforce the expectations of work, and establishing this early helps students to think about work in terms of their own life. What type of work is interesting to them? This starts by asking what types of activities the student likes doing, maybe what they're interested in their free time. They might indicate job interests that seem unrealistic. So instead of steering away from that interest or trying to just change the subject, adults in the young person's life should describe or look at the range of jobs that relate to that interest. For example, rather than pursuing maybe a veterinary school or veterinarian career, what about a vet assistant? Or what about working at the animal shelter as a volunteer to begin with? Finally, what can an employee expect? Many youth don't understand or lack the experience and have unrealistic ideas about what they'll need to do at work. Actually, a lot of youth have trouble on the job because they're not prepared to follow the basic workplace rules like taking direction or interacting appropriately, being responsible for job duties, arriving for work on time, specific break times, and so forth. As we begin thinking and talking about employment, it's important to remember that just as the other aspects of the secondary transition planning process, employment and employment goals is a process and a journey. It's far beyond one or two meetings or one document or one work experience. It truly is a series of events and collaborative ones at that. The movement from school to community or adult life can be confusing for youth and families. It can be stressful. It's certainly emotional. So all of those things need to be taken into account by all the members of the IEP team. But with a frame of mind or a mind shift, it can also be an exciting time of opportunities and growth, experiences. The importance of maintaining high expectations, as we've talked about in some of the other presentations, is important for employment as well. We all know that work is an important piece of our adult lives. It has many benefits, and it also has benefits for people with disabilities. I want you to take a minute to think about your own work experiences. It'll help set the stage for these discussions as we go forward. Just take a minute to think about your first job. How did you get it? How old were you? Did you like the work? How many jobs have you had? Did you learn something about yourself from a job that you didn't like? Go ahead and think about these, write some ideas down. So I've stated a couple times how important work is to all of our lives. Let's look at a couple specific examples. It benefits people by connecting to the community. Youth with disabilities often lose connections to peers when they leave high school, and working or in employment is an excellent way to foster those relationships in a person's community and provide social interactions for them. It gives a sense of purpose and accomplishment. Employment gives purpose to our days. Youth with disabilities benefit from daily structure that work can offer. Work increases self-esteem by knowing that they've accomplished and a job well done. It helps to build social skills and responsibility. The workplace is an opportunity for young people to learn how to be responsible, practice hopefully some of the skills they've been learning at home and practicing for years, and appropriately interacting with others on the job site. Youth learn how to work as part of a team, how to be responsible for specific job duties, and importantly, how to take directions from other people or people other than their parents. And lastly, it provides income. This will be probably one of the first things that teenagers will say when they look at or if they're asked why work is important. But work does allow people to be economically self-sufficient. We know not all youth with disabilities will be self-sufficient, but supporting oneself to the maximum extent possible should really be the goal. And again, it always contributes to the self-concept of the individual as well. Just as in the other parts of secondary transition planning, family involvement is a must. It's key. I'd like to make a little side note here that though we use the term families, there are many types of families. A youth's family consists of people who they trust and identify with, who have special knowledge of them and they've got a relationship with. A guardian, coach, or a family friend can be family. And it's important that professionals involved in the secondary transition planning not have a narrow view of what a youth's family might look like. Youth with involved families are more likely to have better transition outcomes. Research proves that youth who have involved families during transition years have better outcomes in education and employment. Being involved means also holding the youth accountable and helping them to build responsibility and self-advocacy skills. Families could be considered a youth's first and most consistent quote-unquote case manager that they will ever have. Parents have a long-term relationship with coordinating education, community services, healthcare, transportation, housing, independent living, and so on. Families have valuable information to share and knowledge to advocate for a fulfilling future for their youth. Families can also help and have a very important role in helping prepare the youth for and finding work experiences. They help their youth with disabilities prepare for employment by advocating for the use of soft skills and building working skills into a student's IEP, fostering responsibility and practice interpersonal skills throughout home and daily life, advocating for a wide variety of work experience for their youth, using knowledge of the youth to identify potential job matches, using their own personal networks to help find work experience opportunities, and then of course researching and accessing community employment supports. All of these things are examples of what families can do on a daily basis to continue that mindset of employment. Now let's take a look at a couple of laws that support this idea of work being important, especially for people with disabilities. First of all, Iowa is an employment first state. What does that mean? Well, employment first is based on the idea that employment is the first priority and preferred outcome of publicly funded services for people with disabilities. This might sound like another new thing or project, but it really isn't. Instead, it's a way for Iowa Services to increase integrated work options for Iowans with disabilities. What are integrated work options? That simply means that youth and people with disabilities will be given opportunities to work alongside their peers without disabilities in the community. Employment First requires a positive view of everyone's work potential in the community and integrated settings. It's understood that work probably will look different for all youth and adults with disabilities, but the key is reaching one's full potential. Families are encouraged to explore and build beliefs about their students' abilities and to advocate for meaningful work experiences and employment. There's a guidebook for families around this employment first concept. The guidebook can be found at ivrs.iowa.gov, or at askresource.org under Resources. I encourage you, if you'd like, to take a minute and go to one of these links and check out the guidebook that explains Employment First in more detail. In 2014, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act was signed into law, replacing the Workforce Investment Act. The purpose of WIOA was to empower individuals with disabilities to maximize employment, economic self-sufficiency, independence, and inclusion and integration into society. The goal of WIOA is for everyone to have competitive, integrated employment. Basically, that is work where a person is paid at least minimum wage, is eligible for the same benefits and advancement opportunities as employees in similar situations. WIOA not only has implications for adult workers, but also families and schools. WIOA impacts youth in that it serves eligible youth ages 14 to 24 who have barriers to employment. It sets out to prepare youth for employment and/or post-secondary education. And it also encourages the link between school and work, really trying to connect exploring and learning and training. So families and schools will see WIOA at work in two major ways. First, the Iowa Vocational Rehabilitative Services, or IVRS, will be more involved with high school age students and the IEP activities if a student is eligible. A term that families should start becoming familiar with is Pre-Employment Transition Services, or sometimes known as PREETs. We'll look in more detail on this in a minute. But these are activities that provide students with job exploration, education, experiences, and training. Again, there's a guidebook or a resource that explains what WIOA means for Iowa youth, families, and schools. It just simply tries to take some of the legalese or the technical language and put it in terms of what it might look like and what it means for schools and families. That can be found at ivrs.gov or askresource.org under Resources. Since pre-employment transition services, or PREETs, are the primary way in which students, families, and schools will see WIOA in action, let's take a little bit of time to look at them in more detail. Pre-employment transition services are provided to students with disabilities ages 14 to 21. They're provided by Vocational Rehabilitative Services, or IVRS, together with schools and families. The important note here and takeaway is that students do not need to be found eligible for VR services before they can receive and benefit from pre-employment transition services. PREETs should be made available to all students ages 14 to 21 who have IEPs or other challenges to employment. The focus really is on collaboration and making opportunities available. There are 5 specific service areas under PREET. They are job exploration counseling, work-based learning, opportunity counseling, workplace readiness training, and self-advocacy instruction. Job exploration counseling is provided to a student with a disability in helping them to learn and understand the demands and required skills to perform a job and to make informed decisions. Just really helping them look at the reality of what the job will take. Work-based learning are just that, hands-on experiences provided in an integrated setting to the maximum extent that's appropriate for that individual, where students learn and practice skills. Opportunity counseling provides information about post-secondary education or training programs and the enrollment process, skills, admissions requirements, all of those things, as well as the available supports for learnings after high school. Workplace readiness training develops social and work skills needed for successful employment. That really speaks to those soft skills that we discussed earlier. Self-advocacy instruction involves training and on communicating one's own needs, opinions, interests, really just practicing those skills of speaking up for oneself. I would encourage you to take a look at that resource that I discussed in the previous slide. On page 2, there's actually a chart that provides examples of what pre-ETS activities might look like, and it also provides areas in which IVRS might be responsible for doing some tasks, what tasks schools might be responsible for, and also it gives families ideas of what they might do in each of those areas to really support their young person in developing these skills. This is a picture of Marissa. She's from Iowa, and she's standing in her greenhouse that she and her family have turned into a thriving business. It's called Straw Hat Farms, if you want to check that out. This is a great example of self-employment, which is just one of the work options that we'll discuss as we prepare for work as an adult. Career exploration is the first area of these required activities. Exploring careers provides youth with some great benefits. Providing different experiences helps the youth make informed choices. Learning about different jobs, volunteer opportunities, job shadowing, interviewing people that are in that current job all provide youth with important information about understanding the whole picture of what a job might entail. It also provides exposure to types of careers maybe that the youth hadn't thought of that are connected to their strengths or areas of interest. Youth should be offered a variety of opportunities to visit different work environments and settings, different learning opportunities or colleges. Career exploration also provides youth with an understanding of the requirements or education or skills needed for that particular job. And they need to understand what's required so that they can seek or investigate ways in which they can meet those requirements, and teams can incorporate that into their students' goals. Lastly, career exploration provides youth with important opportunities for practicing their communication of those self-advocacy skills they've been developing. They also can practice communicating the accommodations they need in specific work or learning settings. Education and career assessments. This is a good time to talk about the importance of data in making these decisions for the transition planning team. Just as in previous years of the IEP, data should be used to make these important decisions. And it's not just one paper and pencil task. Assessments and ways in which information is collected and gathered can be through observations, work samples, portfolios, all of these types of things. Career assessments identify not only the career interests, but also the current work skills and necessary accommodations that a student might need. Families should ask about the process, especially if an assessment shows something that they don't understand or necessarily agree with. A quick paper pencil questionnaire or a formal worksite evaluation, all of these types can help inform employment goals and plans. These assessments are often part of the school transition program, and they're done to inform the IEP teams again. When a youth is working with IVRS or vocational rehabilitative services, that program uses lots of different types of work assessments to determine what needs to be done in order to help the student achieve an employment outcome. And I encourage you to check out or visit ivrs.gov, and there's specifically a section for high school students, and you can look at the services and maybe some assessment samples on that site. Preparing for successful adult work while still in high school. Engaging in meaningful work experiences while in high school is critically important. Work experiences, that term refers to any activities, not just paid work, but volunteer work, job shadowing, informational interviews, all of those types of things, maybe even responsibilities within the school setting. Any activity that helps youth practice work is beneficial. Using the IEP to focus and really build on those work skills. Remember, work skills also include interpersonal soft skills, or those everyday skills that contribute to a person's success in the working world. Those types of skills can be practiced during activities like sports or clubs or projects or activities in the community. Many academic areas addressed in the student's IEP can also be considered or can find connections to building work skills. Lastly, and we've talked about this a lot, but practicing those self-advocacy and the disability disclosure skills in high school is important. Practicing how to communicate their accommodations and how to request them is key for youth with disabilities. And IEP goals can certainly address all of these areas as well. We've talked so much about how important work experiences are for students. This slide just gives some specific examples of different types. It might be self-employment, when a person with a disability chooses to be their own boss. And IVRS has programs that support people with disabilities in starting their own business. So asking questions of the VR counselor or researching that on IVRS would be beneficial. Internships, either paid or not, are valuable work experiences. When the youth works in a single location and learns a job or a variety of jobs that are related to a specific career field or business can be beneficial. Apprenticeships are similar to internships, but relate to learning a skilled trade and is done under the guidance of a qualified skilled worker. So it's a little more structured than an internship. Job shadowing is just like it sounds, work experience strategy where the young person identifies a career that they're interested in and shadows or follows a person who works in that field. This allows a student to see the real work and environment of the job. Informal interviews, providing students with information about a job from someone who actually works in that field. And finally, don't underestimate the benefit of volunteering. It's a great way for youth to gain experience in a variety of fields. And it's a great place and environment to practice social skills, interpersonal skills. Volunteering should not be the sole experience though, and it shouldn't be a substitute for paid employment. You should be encouraged to explore many different opportunities and include them maybe on a resume or in their portfolio. Here's a list of some additional specific skills that can help prepare students for success at work. Solving problems and making decisions. Students should be empowered to make decisions and solve problems at home and at school in their daily life. The more that they practice, the more that their independence and confidence will increase. Using technology should really be part of their everyday skills that they utilize and develop as well. Reading and doing some basic math. Many jobs for which students apply will require some level of reading and math, or identifying some accommodations that are needed for the student to perform those tasks is important. And it's also important for students to understand and take directions from people other than their parents or teachers. And understanding the employer's goal, their overall goal, is important for youth to understand that the business has a goal for itself and their job is to help the business achieve that goal. The following is a list of some specific examples of soft skills, those skills that we keep talking about and that are important to develop and for the student to practice on their every day at home, school, and the community. The first being, does the student understand and are they able to maintain personal appearance? Or do they need some assistance, maybe some accommodations in terms of checklists to help them maintain or to remember what's necessary? Second, does your student communicate so others can understand? In most jobs, we have to communicate in some way with coworkers, customers, supervisors. If a student has trouble communicating, maybe role playing or starting to identify those accommodations that are necessary for workplace interactions during high school is key. Does your youth show personal responsibility, like showing up for work on time, showing up to class on time with the necessary materials, Or again, if they need assistance doing so, identifying those accommodations in high school is very beneficial. Do they take directions from supervisors or teachers in a positive way, reinforcing that people other than their parents may need to give them directions or assign tasks is an important skill for students to practice. And overall, does the students have enthusiasm and a good attitude? Employers look for youth who are enthusiastic about their job that they're applying for, and of course, show a good attitude about working and learning. Here's some additional practical tips for preparing, practicing. As we're talking about these skills and goals and priorities for the students to practice and learn, it's important that we emphasize it's the student's future being planned for, and they need to be actively involved using their own voice for their own life. Youth should practice using their voice in their own lives as much as possible in every environment. Students can practice expressing their ideas or their career interests or even simple decisions of their everyday life as what they want to eat or what they want to wear. That can be an easy place to start for expressing oneself, exercising and practicing those skills on an everyday basis. One excellent way to help youth exercise these self-advocacy skills is to have them actively involved in IEP meetings. You can begin this process by expecting your student to attend the meetings when they turn age 14 or before. At least considering that during the high school years is important and necessary for the IEP to look at when it might be appropriate for that student to attend. Also, building relationships with teachers and mentors, employees, and other peers, of course, is important. Youth with disabilities benefit from seeing other people with disabilities who have been successful in college or in a work that might interest them. And of course, we all know how beneficial interpersonal and social skills can be for youth. Just like self-advocacy, self-awareness is another skill that's important to develop and practice for high school students preparing for their transition after high school. How all of us see ourselves is important, but self-awareness helps youth advocate for themselves. Having students understand their disability and how it impacts them is a critical skill that should be developed and practiced. A disability does not define them, but it can have an impact on their ability to learn, work, or interact. And a student knowing how to express what they need and asking what may help them be successful is an important skill. Youth who are approaching adulthood should begin to understand fully their disability and its impact. The end goal is for the youth to understand why they may be experiencing the struggle, and more importantly, the steps they need to develop strategies or to accommodate how to overcome them. Does a student know how to communicate to others about their disability? One qualification for some adult services and accommodations is the ability of a person to disclose his or her disability. Disclosure or expressing their disability is always a personal choice. So youth, to the greatest extent possible, should be talked to about the pros and cons of explaining their disability and its impact to employers as well as to schools in the future. Self-awareness helps youth advocate for themselves, and families can advocate for the inclusion of this self-awareness and disclosure skill building into a student's IEP. There are a wonderful couple of resources that talk specifically about disability disclosure. One of them is from the National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability for Youth. It's called the 411 on Disability Disclosure. It is a workbook for youth with disabilities and goes through different activities that the families and school professionals can work with as the transition age youth begins developing through this stage. Another resource is the Iowa Disability Determination Services, or DDS. It's actually a bureau or department of IVRS and can be located on IVRS's website. Here's a list of some community resources that can be very valuable for the families and the secondary transition planning team as you begin to navigate through the transition process. We've referred to IVRS a lot in this presentation, and they are definitely a valuable resource for the families and teams. Eligibility for IVRS services is based on the impact of a person's disability and on finding and maintaining employment. County services vary from county to county, so it's important for family or team members to look at the services that might be available for youth with developmental disabilities or mental health issues, traumatic brain injuries, and similar. Centers for Independent Living are organizations that provide services to people with disabilities in the form of advocacy, referral, support groups, transportation training, and even assistance with physical building access. Workforce Development Centers are also a variety of publicly funded workforce assistance programs that are available to all people, including those with disabilities. Youth could visit a workforce development center, for instance, to have help with their resume or with job searches. Other work preparation programs like Job Corps are also available and could be asked about in their team meetings. Here's some contact information for the resources discussed in the previous slide and some important takeaways and tips. Researching the Iowa Vocational Rehabilitative Services and specifically that high school students section would be very beneficial, not only for families, but also for secondary transition planning teams. Investigating those county supports and agencies that are specific to your local area is also key. We haven't talked a lot about benefits planning, but that is something that could be useful to start understanding the impact of work on Social Security benefits. There's a big misconception, and it's inaccurate, that people with disabilities cannot work because doing so would jeopardize or would reduce their entitlement benefits like SSI. That is not true. And Iowa has programs that allow people on Social Security to retain those benefits while working. And there's specific people in the work incentive planning and assistance agencies that can help families and teams understand how the employment affects these benefits and the ways in which to work within them. And lastly, it's certainly important not to forget about looking at housing options, healthcare, and transportation needs of the youth in your local area as they start planning and transitioning for their life beyond high school. Here's 3 additional resources that can be valuable to teams as they navigate through the transition planning process. Office of Disability Employment Policy, or ODEP, provides a great deal of information and resources. One of those is a curriculum that's full of practical activities and tips that can be used for high school students as they develop and practice their employment skills. It's called Skills to Pay the Bills, and it's actually been utilized by lots of IEP and transition planning teams in developing those goals and looking at including those activities into a student's educational program. Job Accommodation Network, or JAN, has been around for a while and is just a wealth of ideas and options for teams to consider as they support students in a variety of work settings. And lastly, the Iowa Workforce Development has several locations around the state, and it would be worth a team checking into to see if there is one close to your area. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation about preparing for work as an adult. Please take a minute to look at some of those websites and resources that were reviewed. And as always, if you have follow-up questions about this particular presentation, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at askresource.org.